Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast, and I'm your host, John Puma from the Sake Notes, also the administrator over at the Internet Sake Discord. Come down and have a drink with us sometime. And around these parts, I'm the local sake nerd.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I'm a sake samurai, sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and chatting about all things sake and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand.
Hello, Tim. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. What are we up to today?
Well, we have a special guest with us on the line. I want to welcome to the show our good friend, Sam Barickman. Sam, welcome.
Thank you for having me here, being part of the revolution.
Yes.
Ooh, I like that. We're going to have to
Comrades.
require guests to say that every time now.
So, Sam, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and how you got involved in the sake industry in the first place?
Yeah. So, I always tell people it was not something I planned to do. This was not a career move that I intentionally made. Which fortunately I think is the case for a lot of people in the industry. It really does suck you in at some point. But I did study Japanese theater as well as Japanese cinema in college. That was kind of my gateway point. And before that, I had just always been quite interested in Japan in general. And so after college, I just really needed to get there. I ended up spending about a few months in Yamanashi. I was working on a peach orchard, of all things, in a sort of work-to-live program out there. And so during the day, we were cultivating the fruits, and at night, we would drink sake. I had already known that I really enjoyed sake from just restaurants in New York. I think the irony is that I was probably drinking American sake at that point, the cheap hot sake that you get at the cheapest sushi restaurant or izakaya you can find. And I think that was really, everyone talks about that first great moment that you have with sake, and that was really summed up for me. So when I was in Yamanashi, the closest brewery to the orchard was Shichiken. So we would end up drinking just these show beans of Shichiken after a long day of working the fields, and that was just one of those things that it really opened so many doors for me and made me realize how little I know about this. And how much I really wanted to learn. And when I got back to New York, I just jumped into the industry. Now, I'm thankfully, I can say that I've worked for all three of the tiers of the alcoholic beverage industry, which meaning I've worked for a producer of sake. I've worked for importers and distributors of sake, as well as on premise as a sommelier.
So like a restaurant environment.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. Well, that is a lot of sake exposure. And I love that origin story of, sounds very romantic in the peach fields and then
it really was.
Shichiken.
I mean, you're up a ladder all day, just with Mount Fuji in the background. It was quite a formative moment for me.
Oh my God. Amazing.
Nice. Yeah.
I think another really interesting thing about being there and in Japan, where you get to experience it that way, is that connection between a local community and the sake brewery. Also, one thing that I do recommend when people can travel back to Japan, if you're looking for a cheap way to experience it, doing some kind of work to live program is a really fun experience, when you're young. I did have some people that I was on the farm with that were working in the rice paddies and experiencing it that way, which is really quite incredible. And since then, that was really the only non-sake experience I've had traveling to Japan. Since after that, it's all quite sake related.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people might have this experience in Japan and have this very beautiful experience, Mount Fuji in the background, picking the peaches, drinking sake at night, and then come back to real life and become an accountant. So why did you take that experience drinking sake and come back and want to get into the sake industry? Like, what was your first step there to kind of come back to reality, so to speak, and get into sake?
Circumstance is one thing. I was offered a job at a major distributor at that point that was willing to teach me the ropes. that was when I was able to take the Kikisakushi courses with Tim. So that's how we met. But, I really think it boils down to something that I think is really unique and interesting about sake. And it's, you're not just importing rice, water, yeast, and koji. You're importing this cultural capital with it, but carries with it so much history and just amazing information about Japan itself. So in short, it was a really fun way to learn. The more I learned about sake, the more I was learning about Japan. So it was this kind of perfect convalescence of all of my interests at the time, which also did focus around alcohol. As a 21-year-old after college, it was a very fun thing to start getting into, and it just really, really worked out. And I think then moving into my work as a sommelier was just a whole nother experience of how do you translate that cultural capital into something that is more sellable and translate that experience to a customer in a way that they can both enjoy and hopefully learn something.
Nice. And so what is your latest project? What are you up to these days?
Yeah, so currently I am working for a new importer of sake called Sipt Global. We are, when we have all the sake in, going to be importing about, it's 11 producers of both sake and shochu. All of them never before in the United States, which is very exciting. Some very premium, beautiful sakes that you really wonder why they haven't come into the States yet. So it's very, very exciting. I really can't wait for it to all be here.
I always get very excited about new stuff coming over to the States. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. This is secretly sort of a branded episode. And we're going to be talking about Kozaemon, which is one of the brands that you're bringing in, and we're going to focus on that. So what can you tell us about Kozaemon?
So Kozaemon is celebrating about a 300-year history as of now. They are from Gifu Prefecture, which I always find is a quite interesting place for sake, just because it lacks quite a lot of that regional styles that you get from other prefectures. It can kind of be all over the place. The prefecture itself, from north to south, does range quite heavily in terms of the water that you get, and there really isn't kind of any cohesive style, I can say, for any of the sake from Gifu. I'm sure people disagree with that, but it to me just seems like it's just going all over the place, which is an exciting thing. But Kozaemon itself is quite a small brewery. They only make about 1,000 koku a year. Oh, wow. Which is a lot smaller than I thought, given the different types of sake that they produce. And they had kind of gone through a pretty dramatic rebranding in the last 10 years or so in terms of making generally mostly premium high-end sake, which is a kind of an interesting switch from what they had previously done in their 300-year history.
Oh, wow.
And we should mention that the brand name is Kozaemon and the brewery name is Nakashima Jozo. So this is run by the Nakashima family, right?
That's correct.
So this is one of the sakes that you'll be distributing with the new company you're working at. Yeah,
that's correct. This is one that you can get immediately if you were to run out to a store or a restaurant.
Oh, this is one thing we like about our sake. It's immediacy.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned that you feel like Gifu really doesn't have a regional style or prefectural wide style. What about this Kozaemon brand?
I think Kozaemon itself is a very interesting producer of sake because they range, you'll see here in a minute when we taste, even these two sakes have quite a lot of similarities, but they go from producing these gorgeous aromatic Jumai Daiginjos to producing, in my mind, one of the best umeshus on the market right now. They also have been dabbling a lot with other yuzu sakes, that kind of thing. So it's just quite an amazing breadth of style that they're able to produce with such a small production amount. It's really, really quite incredible.
Nice. That's really cool.
Now, you've been kind enough to provide 2 samples for us to taste today, and we'd love to get an introduction to each of these sakes, and then we'll move on to tasting them and talking about them. So why don't you let us know which 2 sakes you brought in for us to taste today?
Yeah. So I have, firstly, Kozaemon's flagship Junmai Daiginjo. This is a sake that is quite interesting to me. I don't know if you've featured any other sakes on the show that have two different types of sake mai incorporated into one sake, which is really exciting. So this particular sake uses both Yamada Nishiki as well as Ayama, which is a very interesting sake grade rice. Both are polished to 40%. And the second that I have for you is their Junmai Ginjo Omachi. This one I find is a very interesting sake. I love omachi. I know you guys do as well. This is polished to 55%, and it is using Bizen Omachi.
Nice.
All right. So it seems like they're paying special attention to the rices that they select.
Yes, very, very calculated in that sense. It is very difficult, especially with Ayama. If we want to jump into that, that's not a rice that you can easily get your hands on if you're a brewery in Japan. The history of Ayama is quite unique. They first started planting that in the early 40s in Hyogo Prefecture. I believe it was 49 when they finally designated it as a sake grade rice. It's got a cool, really great pedigree as well. Its parentage is both omachi and Yamada Nishiki, as well as a few others. Yeah. So it really is a good one to think about, a lot like omachi in a lot of aspects. It's one of those sake grade rice varietals that grows very tall. It's got a big shinpaku. It dissolves really easily into the mash. So all of the things make it a lot more difficult to produce.
That's really cool. I think we should taste some of these. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so let's open the Kozaemon Junmai Daiginjo first and get that in the glass.
Starting the show with a showstopper, Tim.
Yeah. Beautiful bottle, beautiful label too, like a washi paper label.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is really quite beautiful. They have been in the New York market for quite a while. They did rebrand a little bit a few years ago.
One thing I do like about their branding, and this is something that I bring up whenever I see a brand that does this, is they are doing the relatively straightforward label. We've got the brand name in English on the front. There's a very memorable symbol, and the color of that changes based on the bottle you're getting. And that makes it so easy for somebody who's not familiar with sake, who tries one of these, and if they like it or they're curious about it, they can, I've had this one with the gold, I haven't had this one with the blue. And then they try the blue one. And you know, that they begin to get a relationship with the brand because it's a very easy to remember bottle.
Yeah, that is always very helpful. I remember when I was a floor somm, and every night I would play the game, can you get me the sake with the red writing and the blue background? And 9 times out of 10, I would know what they're talking about. If it was labeled like this, it's very, very obvious. Yeah, it does help everyone out.
All right, so we've got this in the glass. It looks beautiful. Let's give it a smell. Wow. All right. So I talk all the time about classic ginjo aromas, like Junmai Daiginjo aromas that are rich tropical fruits, pineapple, melon, banana, and that really comes through on this. Like, this is a textbook sake I want to use in my classes now because it's so perfect for illustrating that what would be a true classic ginjo aroma. Don't you think, Sam?
Absolutely. There's also a bit of restraint there too. Sometimes I find that Junmai Daiginjos can be such a big showstopper for a brewery that it really blows you out of the water with the aromas, to the point that it might actually get in the way of food pairing. And I get that especially with 1801 yeast, where it can kind of be a little overpowering at times. But there is everything that you want is there, and nothing that you don't, essentially.
Nice.
Yeah, John and I talk about balance a lot. Like, no one thing sticks out so much that you don't notice the other things about the sake. So when the aroma is a little bit perfumed and a little bit expressive, you don't want it to be so much that it clobbers you over the head and it's all you can smell at your table when you're trying to enjoy your food. But this has it in perfect control, and it is really balanced aroma and just really enticing, and it really makes me want to take a sip of this sake, quite honestly.
Are you trying to indicate a lack of patience?
Yes.
Don't let me stop you.
He's trying to drop a hint, guys. Well, let's do that then.
Well, kanpai. Cheers.
Oh, hi, everybody.
That's good.
This just makes me smile.
Yes, I'm smiling too.
This sake just makes me smile.
It is really quite elegant. Their goal for this and the reason that they used the ayama was to make a umami driven junmai daiginjo. And I really think that they accomplished that in spades. This is also, I don't know what your serving temperature is right now, but this is one that you can do room temp, even slightly warm. It's quite elegant. It doesn't lose any of that aroma. And a lot of those richer, earthier characters that you get from the ayama are a bit enhanced when you warm it up quite a bit.
Yeah. And I don't think we can move on from this sake without talking about the texture of this sake. It is so silky. What do you think, John?
It is the sake. I mean, I wanted to say, oh, the sake is all about the texture, but there's so many other great things going on. but I do notice that, and I do love it. It's a delight to drink this sake. It's wonderful.
Another really interesting thing I think about it is the versatility in pairing with a sake like this. It is quite spectacular. This does not take a back seat to things like spicier food. Anything that is, you otherwise wouldn't want to pair with junmai daiginjo. This is gonna work. It is quite assertive, and I think that's because of the ayama and those richer, fuller bodied characters to it.
Yeah, it's a really nice, as Tim mentioned, we've been talking about a lot, balance between those. It has that fruit is there, but there is that umami component. There is that incredible texture. There's so much going on, and nothing is distracting you from anything else. It's all very nicely in harmony with one another, and that's one of the reasons I'm a big fan of this. I've liked this brand for a long time, and I'm kind of glad we're getting to talk about it because I think they're making some really great stuff that's flying under a lot of people's radar.
We definitely agree.
Yeah. So you mentioned food pairings. Do you have any specifics that you might want to pair this with yourself?
This one has really stood up to anything I've thrown at it in quite a surprising manner. Even Thai curry and things that you would really have some issues with most sakes with. This has really held its own. It just is also just so eminently drinkable that it's one of those sakes that I don't really even think about pairing much. It's going to go on the table and it'll work, which is quite unique. And especially for junmai daiginjos, I think that it's a little bit easier to baby them a bit more and be a bit more precious with a sake like this. Whereas I really love its ability to just tie any kind of flavors together on the table.
Yeah, I think if you'd have told me a few months ago that somebody was going to recommend a daiginjo that was going to pair with Thai curry, I would have been like, no, that's not going to happen. And here we are.
It might just be my, what I end up eating quite often, but I have a bit of a spice addiction. So I do really love sakes that can cut through that. It's not always the case. But
I'm going to save some of this and try that.
Try it warm too. Highly recommended.
Definitely.
Yeah. What we've been talking about with this sake, the way I would refer to it is like depth of flavor. It's got layers going on. It's not a one-trick pony or a one-note harmonica. It's got, a nice depth of flavor, and there's layers to discover as the temperature changes, as you sip it slowly. And that is something that is very luxurious to me. And the texture just underscores that luxury and super smooth, super delicious. I love it.
I have to say, when I was trying to write the product descriptions or the flavor profile for the sake, I had to stop for a while because it was almost an impossible task because everything was just in the correct place. I was like, I remember my first note was, this is a perfect junmai daiginjo. I don't know what else you want. Let's just enjoy it.
Stop.
Now, it's great. Excellent. Let's just shut up and drink it. So it was a bit of a challenge in that aspect.
Excellent. Well, let's not forget that we do have a second sake to taste and talk about, everybody. And it's something that is near and dear to at least Tim and I's hearts. Sam, what are your thoughts on omachi?
I mean, I absolutely love it. I think that It's just such a favorite for sake fans for so many different reasons. I think one, just the story of how it was discovered and further cultivated is just so romantic that how could you not love it? I also just love the trend of heritage grade rice in sake. And it's one of the few ones that you can really blind taste pretty easily. Although I'll be curious about this one. I think this is a very interesting expression of omachi. That's why I really wanted to bring it for you guys, because at least for me, I think it's quite unique in terms of the breadth of the omachi sake that you can get currently.
So anyone who's interested in diving a little bit deeper into omachi, you can go back in our archives on sakerevolution.com and look up our wild rice episode focused on omachi, get the whole background story there. So we have a wonderful omachi here from Kozaemon. I'm going to get this open and we'll get this in the glass. All right. Interesting aroma. I don't know if this sounds crazy, but it feels like it feels like these aromas are connected by DNA, but they're not the same.
There's a thread, not off. Yeah,
there's a thread of similarity there.
It is actually the same yeast build for these two sakes. So in terms of aromatic properties, they're pretty similar. Just the massive difference between being the rice varietal and polish ratio.
Yeah. The intensity is dialed way down on the aroma here. But I think that is important in this case. I don't think everything needs to have that daiginjo aroma.
Yeah, and for me, this is a beautiful, lovely aroma, and I do get some fruit notes in there as well, but it's not quite as expressive in the tropical fruit arena as the Junmai Daiginjo was. But there's a similar note in there that tasting these one after the other, it's like, oh yeah, these are related. These are like, siblings. Love it.
There's a very faint, almost cherry that I'm getting on my nose a little bit. And that's something that's unusual in sake, and I love it when I get even a hint of it. So I get really excited.
Yeah. In summary, it's just lovely and it's expressive, and there's a hint of something ricey in there. There's a hint of fruitiness, and it has enough structure and enough body to it that it stands on its own. Just really engaging aroma, and it wants to invite you in to take a sip. So that is what I'm getting from this. Like, really,
it does take a lot of skill and balance to produce a sake that way. I mean, that's such an interesting debate on the amount of aromatics that you want in the sake, and how much is actually too much, and how much you have to dial it back and be a bit more careful with the yeast varietals that you're using, and not really, the goal is to not get in the way.
Maybe that's where that 300 years of experience comes in.
Excellent.
All right, let's give this a taste.
Yes, let's. I know what you mean now about you may not notice this is omachi.
It's quite an interesting tasting to have these back to back as well, knowing at least how genetically connected Ayama is to omachi, and from a technical standpoint, they prove fairly similar. Both have that big shimpaku, both are really hard to polish. They dissolve really easily into the mash. It really does take a skilled hand to tame it, so to speak.
For me, I don't know if you agree, Sam and John, but for me, the kind of mid palate and finish of this has a more umami-driven focus to it than the Junmai Daiginjo had. We mentioned that there's a little bit of umami there, but for me, it's a whisper. And this, on the finish, there is a earthiness to the finish of it that is very pleasant and very umami-driven. And I really, really enjoy that. But I pick up on more earthiness and more weight on this sake than the previous one.
Definitely. And I think a little bit less so for most omachis that I've had, though. It is like really does walk that tightrope line of having that nice sneaky umami, as I like to describe it, where it
Sneaky
just kind of
umami.
comes around in the back, and then you just keep drinking it, and it just builds and builds and builds on itself, but it doesn't ever prevent you from finishing a bottle. But
No, never.
Yeah, these are definitely both umami driven sakes in a very unique way. We're not talking full-blown rich Yamahai Junmai style here, though. It still has that clarity that kind of draws you back.
Okay, hashtag umami sneak attack. I'm starting that tag.
I like it. And I have to say, like, despite being very food friendly in both these cases, I also find these to be immensely sippable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are sakes that can also stand alone and just be something you enjoy for what they are and for how they taste. And if you want to pair them with food, apparently they're going to stand up very well to them. Even Thai curry.
Well, they're just extremely elegant. The aromas, the textures, the finish, the overall impression, the bottle, the label, from A to Z, they are cultured and elegant sakes. They're in that flexible zone when it comes to pairing. They have enough depth of flavor that you can go many different ways with the pairing. So you can tell these are well-crafted sakes for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a really interesting, well, and it speaks to the talent of the brewers, but I also find that when selling sake to a demographic that isn't traditionally Japanese, you kind of always find that they're going to expect a little bit more flavor profile than not. And they do really want it to be both flavorful and yet taste like Japanese water at the same time, which is always a difficult challenge to meet with the customer. But I really this is why I love these, is because I find that it's just both so drinkable and yet has such depth of character and flavor to it as well.
Yeah, this is that style is something that I get a lot of mileage out of, because I want to be able to have something that's just sippable. Everybody knows about the couch, but I also eat. So at the same time, I don't want my my need for nourishment to get in the way of my sake drinking. So I'd like to be able to continue while I'm eating.
Yeah, and these are set it and forget it types of sakes. You really don't need to think too hard about it in terms of food pairing, which is really great. I know that we in the industry have really tried to drive home that this idea that sake will pair with everything, but I think we need to be a bit more specific about it at times. And this is kind of one of the good ones that actually does fulfill on that.
Mm-hmm. A question I get a lot is that what can I bring as a gift, or what sake can I give to my, my in-laws or whatever. These sakes are delicious, and anything from this brand, I think, is going to be a surefire gift-giving sake as well. You can enjoy it at home, but this would be a great style of sake that I think would have a very broad appeal and perfect for Christmas or bring to Thanksgiving, right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially the somachi, I would pair that with turkey easily.
No,
I mean, that's just one thing that
we should. A trend. Our last few episodes, we're talking about Thanksgiving constantly.
Oh yeah. I mean, pound for pound, sake is going to be better than any wine at Thanksgiving. That's one thing that we just need to just admit and tell everyone.
You heard it here, folks.
It's going to be.
Boom.
I mean,
mic
it's
drop.
not.
Mic drop.
Let's be real. A lot of Thanksgiving food's pretty bland. You've got turkey that's probably overcooked. You've got the cranberry sauce, and you really need something to bring it together and liven it up. Let's look at sake as the seasoning sauce in that equation.
Tim, are you all right with all this?
Is that too much?
No, I'm all right with this.
Okay, I know, but Tim's a very pro Thanksgiving foods kind of guy.
I love
It's just it's all flavorless. It's all crap.
No, I should take that back, because it's actually some of my favorite food in the world. But when you're mashed potatoes and gravy is pretty middle road when you talk about. Let's compare that to Thai curry, and it's
all right. Okay, I definitely see your point. Well, I forgot your spice addiction and how that will influence your commentary.
That might be it. But no, for the record, I do love Thanksgiving food, but I've been trying to bring a bottle of sake to every Thanksgiving dinner I think I've had for the last 8 years.
There you go.
Amen. Love that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Sam, I have enjoyed both of these sakes very, very much. Before we wrap up today, can you let our listeners know if they're interested in Kozaemon or your distribution company, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, so we actually just launched our website. Real happy about that. The company is called Sipt Global. That's SIPT Global. Website is siptglobal.com. That will give you a look into all the exciting sakes that we will have in the pipeline. And as I mentioned, Kozaemon is available at New York, LA markets.
All right, everyone. So you heard it here first. Keep your eyes out for Sipt Global distributors, and of course, keep your eyes out for Kozaemon sake as well. Sam, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure to taste with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's make it a. We'll bring back more sake. Let's just go that way.
Hello.
But once I get the everything good, we'll do this again.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Sam. Thanks, John. So great to taste with both of you. And I want to thank our listeners as well for tuning in. We really do hope that you're enjoying our show. If you would like to show your support for Sake Revolution, the best way to help us out is to back us on Patreon. We appreciate our Patreon supporters so much, and any contributions we get through Patreon go directly to supporting all the costs that go into making Sake Revolution and bringing it to you every week.
That's right. And our Patreon is located at patreon.com/Sake Revolution. But that's not the only way to support us. You can also support us when you subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. And please leave us a review. It's a great way to get the word out about the show. Also, tell your friends, tell your family dog, cats. Tim, any other animals in the family we're okay with? That's it? Just dogs and cats?
Yes.
It's been a while since we mentioned dogs and cats, Tim. And
as always, to learn more about any of the topics or any of the sakes we tasted in today's episode, be sure to visit our website, sakerevolution.com, for all the detailed show notes. And for all of your sake question needs, we have you covered. Please send an email to us at feedback@sakerevolution.com. So, until next time, everybody, please grab a glass. Remember to keep drinking sake and kanpai. Perfect. That was perfect.